Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Mom Street USA. I am your host, Jackie, and on today's episode, we are doing the opposite of what we did last week. So if you were with us for the last episode, we talked about all things thrill rides, and we gave you kind of the breakdown for the ultimate thrill day at Walt Disney World. Well, today we are going to be talking about dark rides. So the goal of today is to give you the ultimate guide to dark rides at Walt Disney World. So many people think about the types of rides at Disney and they immediately think of a dark ride, right? But what is actually a dark ride? Like, what is the official, or rather, probably unofficial, description and definition of a dark ride? Well, a dark ride consists of some sort of transportation system, right? A ride vehicle of some kind that takes riders through a building with a number of scenes. Dark rides are typically highly immersive. They feature a lot of theming and storytelling. They basically move you through the scenes of a narrative that they are telling. So that is kind of what the parameters are that we are using today to explain and describe our dark rides that we're going to talk about. So today we're going to highlight all of the dark rides across all 4 Walt Disney World parks. Now, I will also put in here that there are some thrill rides that we talked about last week that are also dark rides. So I will mention those in this episode, but we are not going to go into super in-depth discussion about them again. We just talked about them last week, and today's focus is really more on these slower moving dark rides that are more accessible to younger kiddos. Just keep that in mind. Again, I will mention the few. There's only a small number. There's maybe only 2 or 3 that we're going to talk about that are considered dark rides that are also thrill rides. So we will mention them in the dark ride category in their respective parks, but we won't be going into detail with them. So as we go through this list, we are going to be mentioning things for our younger and smaller kiddos that you may need to consider with some of these, because some of these rides have things that could be considered maybe a little bit spooky. It might be dark. There might be some drops. So I'm going to try to note some of those as we go. So that way, if you are visiting with younger, smaller kiddos, you kind of have an idea on whether or not this dark ride is a good one for you guys to add to your list. Overall, these rides are generally really accessible for all ages and all sizes. So if you are looking for that type of list, that is what we are talking about today. So we're going to start at Animal Kingdom. That just seems to be the place that I've started in all of these little series of themed days and themed lists that we've been going through over the past several episodes of Mom Street over here. And Animal Kingdom only has one true dark ride at the moment, and that is Navi River Journey. Now, I'm going to give you a description of each of the rides as we go, just so if you're not familiar with it, you kind of have an idea of what you're looking at with each ride. And then I'll talk about any height requirements, and then we'll talk about any sort of like sensory things to note for your kiddos. So this ride, Navi River Journey, is a slow-moving boat ride that takes you through the sights and sounds of Pandora's glowing bioluminescent rainforest. It is a very calm, relaxing boat ride, very beautiful, very immersive. This is an any height ride, so anybody can ride it. And the only real sensory thing that you need to maybe look out for is that it is very dark in this ride because of the lighting and the neons and the glowing and the bioluminescent and all of that. I would say 90% of this ride is fairly dark. So something to consider when it comes to this attraction. Now, before we leave Animal Kingdom after just a very brief visit, I will mention that coming soon-ish, we don't have dates and times yet, but there will be more attractions being added to Animal Kingdom, and we are supposed to be getting some form of Encanto-themed Casita dark ride. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like. We have no idea when it's going to open. So depending on when you're listening to this, take a look at that and see if any dates have been announced for that, but not anticipating that until probably 2027, 2028-ish timeframe with that. So that wraps up our discussion at Animal Kingdom. Let's hop over to EPCOT next. EPCOT has several dark rides. So let's kind of just jump in here, starting at the front side of the park. So the first one over here is Spaceship Earth. So Spaceship Earth is the attraction that you find inside of the big giant Epcot golf ball, right? That's the icon and the symbol of the park is that giant golf ball looking geodesic sphere. But Spaceship Earth is the attraction you find inside of there. On this ride, you are going to travel on a slow moving omnimover through time back to the dawn of humanity to discover the origins and evolutions of language and communication technology. So it's a ride kind of up and around and back down through the ball. It's got several different scenes throughout history you go through, tons of audio animatronics, tons of recognizable historical events, things like that with that one. It is an any height ride as well. And things to note on this one are periods of darkness because your ride vehicle itself stays pretty much in the dark the entire time. There are lights in the different show scenes that you go through, but overall, you are pretty much sitting in the dark. And then there is a section of the ride track where you do actually go backwards. It's still very slow. It's not jarring. It's a very gradual backwards motion, but just something to note. I know the first time that my kiddos went on one of these Omnimover style rides that did turn and go backwards, and you'll hear a couple other of these that do as we go through. They were just a little like, what is happening? Where are we going? Kind of mentality. So you may just want to prep your kiddo for that if that's something that you think may kind of catch them by surprise. The next attraction and dark ride that we're going to talk about at Epcot is The Seas with Nemo and Friends. And in this attraction, you are going to board a clamshell to journey through the scenes from Finding Nemo. So they take you through the scenes. The story is a little bit vague, I guess I would say in this one, but you do go through and see like Mr. Ray and some of the his classmates. You see the sharks. You end up with the sea turtles, but the storyline itself is just very vague about the characters saying, "Have you seen Nemo? Where's Nemo?" That type of situation for that one. But the coolest thing about this ride that I love is the marrying of the animated characters onto the real life aquarium background. So the last, I don't know, maybe quarter of the ride, you are looking through aquarium windows into the real aquariums that they let you out in after the end of the ride. And the Imagineers figured out how to overlay these animated characters on top of those, which I think is so cool. And it took me a couple rides to like actually realize that that was what was happening, because sometimes you don't see a ton of movement in those aquariums depending on what's out and what's in the tanks for the day and what your timing is when you pass by. But like sometimes you go through there and there used to be dolphins. There are no longer dolphins in that space, but I remember seeing dolphins, or you'll see sharks or stingrays or other fish swimming by. So that I think is super, super cool. And the other great thing is that this attraction lets you out into that aquarium space where there's a ton of things to do. I always, always highly suggest this area for little kids at Epcot because there's so much to look at. There's so much to explore. It's truly the edutainment, right, that Epcot has been known for in the past, where you've got information about the animals and different things that you can look at. They've got manatees, they've got sharks, they've got little tiny sea urchins and all sorts of other sea creatures there. And they do have a playground, little play space in there as well if you need to burn off some energy while you're visiting. And it's really nice and air conditioned. So just a win all around. I love, love, love The Seas with Nemo and Friends. It's a super great attraction over at Epcot. It isn't any height attraction. And the only thing to note on this one, again, is periods of darkness in that attraction as well. The other thing to note is if you've got a kiddo that maybe is a little bit sensitive to like motion and screens, the scene with the sea turtles can give some people kind of like a vertigo, dizzy feeling because you're in like a tunnel of a screen and it does kind of do this circular motion with the bubbles in the water and all that kind of stuff. So just note that if you've got a sensitive kiddo when it comes to motion simulators and things like that, you may want to just have them close their eyes or figure out a way to make that scene okay for them. But other than that, very accessible, super fun ride over at Epcot. Let's continue our list of dark rides here. Right next door in the land building, we are going to find Living with the Land. So, Living with the Land is our next dark ride on our list. It is a very calm and relaxing boat ride that takes you through the growing process and the different greenhouses that they use to grow a ton of the produce and some other things for some of the restaurants at Disney parks. The really neat thing about this is if you choose then, while you're in the land pavilion, to enjoy a meal at either Sunshine Seasons, which is the little quick service area that is at the bottom on the lower level of that, or at the Garden Grill restaurant, which is the character dining that is found inside of the land. It actually, the entire restaurant slowly rotates as you eat, and you actually, in one section of that rotation, you get to look down into Living with the Land, into the farm scene at the beginning, which is super fun. But if you choose to eat at either of those both highlight and have fresh produce and seafood that is featured on Living with the Land. So if you plan to do like a garden grill character dining, maybe hop on Living with the Land before you go to your dining reservation. So that way you can see where it's coming from, or vice versa, right? If you don't have time before, do it after, just to make that connection for your kids. I think that's super cool. This is an any height ride, and any sensory things to note. Again, you do have periods of darkness in this. There are a few sound things that maybe might get your kiddo a little bit more sensitive. They've got some loud water and some storm scenes that or like lightning that you may hear that might set them off a little bit with that one. But overall, a very calm, very serene boat ride. It is one that does an overlay for some of the EPCOT festivals too, which is really fun. So like when you have Festival of the Arts, they might have little things set up throughout some of the greenhouses that are like nods to Festival of the Arts. They do the glittering or glimmering, is it glimmering greenhouses? I think it's called, overlay at Christmas time with all the hundreds and thousands of Christmas lights, which is another really fun overlay. So overall, Living with the Land, it's kind of a ride that not a lot of people choose to do with their kids, but I think it's a super fun ride to do with kids. I think it's a really great experience for the kids to have. My kids love it. They love to learn about all the plants and look at what's growing and see how different things grow in because they use some different unique systems and how they grow some of their produce there. So overall, really great dark ride experience over in the Land Pavilion. Sticking on that side of the park, let's talk about next Journey into Imagination with Figment as our next dark ride. And on this ride, you are going to take a ride through the Imagination Institute with Figment, the lovable, whimsical, chaos causing purple dragon. So, this is a very unique ride in that it features a character that is not really found in like Disney IP, like movie wise, but it is a park-specific character. So, your kids may or may not latch on to Figment. My daughter, the first time that we went on Figment, became immediately obsessed instantly. She loves Figment. She loves the character. She loves the ride. So you'll have to see what your kiddos do with this purple dragon character. It is an any height ride. A few sensory things with this one, though, to note. This ride does include periods of complete darkness, like complete darkness. There are some scents in there that could bother your kiddo. There are some loud noises and a few little jump scares that happen in this. So just be warned that it is one that I don't know that I would take littles on, but I would say, like, probably preschool age and up would be pretty safe. Other than that, it may or may not scare them if they're very sensitive to, like, jump scares and things like that. So keep that in mind if you're planning to do Figment. And there are a few lighting effects as well, but again, it's not scary, and it's not meant to be scary. It's meant to be fun and whimsical and just kind of immerse you in the Imagination Institute because you're going through the senses, right? You're going through sight, you're going through smell, you're going through sound and taste and things like that. So it's meant to immerse you in those experiences. So, but again, not a scary ride by any means. Hopping over to the other side of the front section of EPCOT, let's talk about briefly a few of these dark rides that are also thrill rides. So, over on that side, you will have Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. That is a true roller coaster. It is a full thrill ride. It does have a height requirement of 42 inches. It is considered a dark ride because it does take you inside a building through a story. It qualifies. So, had to put it on the list, but it is definitely a more of a thrill ride than what I would consider a dark ride for that instance. And then the other one over there is Test Track. Same thing here. The first part of Test Track, I would say, is more dark ride than thrill ride, but it does go fast. This one also does have a height requirement you have to look out for. Again, not going to go into super detail, but you definitely want to consider the fact that this is a dark ride thrill ride for Test Track as well. We're not done yet in Epcot. We've got 3 more to do. We're going to venture out into World Showcase for the next one. Our next dark ride is Grand Fiesta Tour starring the Three Caballeros. Most people just call it the Three Caballeros or Three Cabs. This is a calm boat ride in the back of the Mexico Pavilion that features Donald Duck and his other 2 caballeros, aka the Three Caballeros. This attraction is kind of hidden back in the back of the Mexico Pavilion, which makes it really nice because it typically doesn't have longer than like a 10 or 15-minute wait. And it is a very calm, very enjoyable dark ride that kind of just takes you through different sights from the movie The Three Caballeros, if you're familiar with it. If you're not familiar with it, it's still a really fun attraction because you're hunting for Donald the entire time. So as long as your kiddo is familiar with Donald Duck, you're good to go on this one. And you kind of just cruise through different scenes of Mexico. And I really love this attraction. It's such a standard staple boat dark ride attraction, but I just love it so much. Just a note on Three Caballeros that, and we're not getting into lightning lanes and things like that, but I do just want to note that this one is not featured on lightning lane. So if you're planning ahead and you're planning accordingly for what dark rides you may want to use your lightning lanes on at Epcot, this one is not featured on one. So just, but again, it doesn't usually have a long wait time. It is an any height attraction, anybody can ride, and no major sensory concerns here. There is some music and some things, and the ending scene has some fireworks kind of up in lighting effects on the ceiling, but they're not loud. The music isn't overly loud. It's really a super accessible attraction for anybody that wants to ride it. So, highly suggest this on your dark ride tour across all 4 parks. Highly suggest Three Caballeros. Now, the last 2 on here are the 2 most popular dark rides in Epcot. We're going to do Frozen Ever After next, and then we'll talk about Remy because that's the other one. But Frozen Ever After is a dark ride in the Norway Pavilion of Epcot. For this ride, you're going to join Olaf and all of your other Frozen character friends, Trolls and Sven and Anna and Elsa and Kristoff, on a trip up to Elsa's Ice Castle. A few notes about this one. You will likely get at least splashed on this ride. It is a boat ride. Some trips on this ride are worse than others as far as the amount of water goes, and there's really no predicting it. I have gone on this ride and gotten off with less than a splash. I have gone on this ride and gotten off with an entire side of my body wet. So keep that in mind. I would place your littles towards the center and put your grown-ups on the outsides of this to help with that if your littles are water sensitive and worried about getting splashed on that. It is an any height ride, which I love that it is a frozen attraction that anybody can go on. But do keep in mind there are 2 drops in this attraction. The first one is a slow backwards drop. And I don't even know that I would call it a drop. It's more of just like a descent downhill backwards. So you get up to Elsa and then you turn and go backwards as you leave her. And then the other drop is at the bottom of that slow descent. Your boat will pivot, and then that is the true fast drop that you have in this attraction. It's a little bit of a bumpy ride. The music can be a little bit loud at the Let It Go scene when you're up at Elsa's Ice Castle. So a couple things to keep in mind with that one. but a super great ride for any Frozen lover that wants to go and visit Elsa's ice castle. I would definitely look at Frozen Ever After. It does tend to have a long wait, so plan a lightning lane, plan to rope drop it, especially if you've got early entry. If you've got early entry, you're looking at probably less than 30 to get on it. If you are on time and headed there straight away, you'll be good to go with that one. And then our last dark ride at EPCOT that we're going to talk about for today is Remy's Ratatouille Adventure. This is located in the France Pavilion of World Showcase. It is a trackless ride system in which you are shrunken down to the size of a rat and you adventure through the kitchen and you come across some humans who don't necessarily want you there. So it is a kind of it's a very smooth trackless ride. It is very screen dependent, but also has some practical story elements to it as well. It is also an any height attraction, but do keep in mind with this one when it comes to sensory notes. This ride can be very overstimulating for kiddos. My own kids have ridden it a couple times. They do not ride it anymore. They do not like some of the sensory elements to it. There are several big jump scares, a hand coming at you through the cabinet, things like that. You do get water sprayed at you at one point in time. There's one section where you go underneath an oven that turns on, and the ceiling up above you becomes engulfed in flame. Not really, but you know what I mean with that. The ride itself is a little jostly, kind of side to side. So, a couple of those reasons are why my kiddos choose not to ride it. So, if you've got a kiddo that is especially sensitive to jump scares, I would really, really consider this one. A suggestion that I do have is if you're unsure and you've got more than one adult in your group, send one of the adults through the single rider line to do a trial run. And then they can come back out and see whether or not they think that your kiddos will like to do it. And while you wait, your kiddos can go to the KidCot station that's just like out and around the corner and talk to the cast members over there and do the little activity they have at the KidCot station while you wait for that single rider adult to go through. But that's what I would suggest if you're unsure whether or not your child will like it and you haven't been on it. You can also always look up point of view videos on YouTube as well to give you kind of a base knowledge. But sometimes with rides like this, you don't get the full extent and the full picture of it until you've actually been on it. So with this one, I would suggest sending an adult on it first before you decide. You can always book a lightning lane for it and then modify later or change it out or swap it out for something different if you end up opting out of Remy's Ratatouille Adventure. So just my notes on that as a mom who has been there with, preschool and older kiddos. That's what I would suggest with that one. So, that is the end of our list of dark rides at EPCOT. I told you there were a lot over there. That is definitely the park that has the most outside of Magic Kingdom. So, if you're looking for dark rides and, kiddo friendly rides, EPCOT and Magic Kingdom are definitely your two parks to go to. But that being said, we do have to talk about Hollywood Studios because they do have dark rides over there as well. So let's go there next. So over at Hollywood Studios, we've got 4 dark rides to mention. However, 2 of them are actually also thrill rides. So we're really only going to talk about 2 today. So again, like I mentioned, Epcot and Magic Kingdom are your 2 dark ride parks. Hollywood Studios is more of a thrill ride park. So if you want to know more about these attractions over at Hollywood Studios, last episode we talked about all the thrill rides. Today we're talking about, I think, the rest of the rides. So we either talked about them last episode or this episode. So you've either got thrill rides or dark rides and then shows at Hollywood Studios. So the 2 that we're going to talk about, let's start now with Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. I love this ride so much. It's so much fun. To go on this ride, you're going to enter the cartoon universe of Mickey and Minnie and Goofy and Pluto and Daisy and Donald. With this first attraction to feature Mickey Mouse, which is wild to think this attraction opened in 2020, right before the closures that happened due to the pandemic. But it was the first attraction to feature Mickey Mouse. It's such a fun themed attraction. It is based a lot on the newer cartoons that they did with the newer animation style for Mickey Mouse. So if you're familiar with those shorts cartoons that came out Let's see, probably 2015, 2016 is when they started, I wanna say. I could be a few years off on that. But that is what this ride is themed after. It is an any height attraction, which is really great, but do keep in mind for your sensory needs. It is a fast moving ride. It can be very bumpy, but the biggest sensory concern and complaint almost that I have about this ride is it is so loud. It is so loud. I don't know why it feels so loud in this ride, but it is so loud to the point where my kids will wear earplugs. My kids love this ride. They absolutely love this ride. It is one of our family favorites in all 4 parks. But they will wear their earplugs for this ride because it is so loud in there. So, if you've got a sound sensitive kiddo, definitely headphones, earplugs, whatever ear protection you can do for them for this attraction. 100% you are going to need that for this. But other than that, it is a super fun attraction. You follow, you board the runaway train with Goofy. Well, it's not a runaway train at the beginning. You board a nice, relaxing train ride with Goofy that then becomes a runaway train. And chaos ensues, and your train track or your train car goes all over the place. And of course, all is well in the end because we have to have a happy ending for our Mickey cartoon. But really, really great immersive Mickey Mouse attraction. If you've got a Mickey lover, this one needs to be on your list definitely for sure. The other dark ride that we're going to talk about in Hollywood Studios is Toy Story Mania. Toy Story Mania is a arcade style ride where you're going to ride through an exhilarating 4D shooting arcade game featuring familiar faces from the Toy Story franchise. You're going to run into Buzz, Woody, Jessie, Bullseye, the aliens, the Green Army Men, all of the fun, familiar faces from the Toy Story franchise. This one does require 3D glasses. So if you've got a kiddo that you don't think is going to leave 3D glasses on, that may help you determine whether or not this is a good one for your group. It is an any height attraction, so anybody can ride it. But I would keep in mind the 3D glasses if they're gonna be a kiddo that's going to want to play, and the way that you play this game is different than some of the other, interactive game style attractions that are across property, because this one is like a double handle blaster, but the trigger is a pull string. So you have that pull motion that you need to do in order to shoot and and then aim on the screen. So it's a lot. It's still super fun, even if you don't score 100,000 points. It's still a super fun experience to have together. My kids love it just because they like to try to beat mom and dad on it, which is always a good time for that one. It can be sensory wise a little noisy because the every time you pull, there's sound effects and things that happen with the game action that you have going on. So it can be a little noisy in that, and it does kind of whip you around and spin you in between scenes. So you're stationary for the scene that you're playing the game in, and then once your scene time has ended, they like count it down. They kind of whisk you and spin you away to the next scene. So those are the sensory things to take note of if you are worried about those for Toy Story Mania. But other than that, it's a really great family-friendly attraction where you can challenge your kiddos to try to beat your high score on that one. The other 2 dark rides that we have to talk about at Hollywood Studios are those dark ride thrill rides that we talked about at the beginning. So, Rise of the Resistance is considered a dark ride, but I would also consider it more of a thrill ride than anything else. And same thing goes with Tower of Terror. Tower of Terror is definitely a full thrill ride when it comes to that experience. So if you want more information on those, hop back to last episode to our Hollywood Studios section of the thrill rides. But that rounds out our list over at Hollywood Studios. Again, they have way more thrill rides than anything else over there. So just those 2 dark rides to note for Hollywood Studios. So now we are headed to our final park for our ultimate guide to dark rides at Walt Disney World, and that is Magic Kingdom. So let's talk about dark rides over at Magic Kingdom. These are in no particular order when I wrote them down, they were just off the top of my head, but we're going to start with one of my favorite dark rides and one that you can get on pretty easily, which is nice, and that is Under the Sea Journey of the Little Mermaid. It is a ride in Fantasyland in the backside of the park. And for this ride, you will enter your clamshell ride to revisit the story of The Little Mermaid. So this one is a true retelling story. It's one of those omni mover situations where you jump in the clamshell and take your ride throughout. A few sensory things to note for this one is that the vehicle does rotate backwards at one section as you are going underwater to start the story with Scuttle as your narrator. It does kind of go backwards and lean you back a little. It's less dramatic than some of the other ones that lean you back, but it does go backwards and it does lean you back as far as that goes. So, other than it going backwards for that brief moment, it is a very calm, very enjoyable ride through the story of The Little Mermaid. It is an any height attraction, anybody can ride it. And again, this one, now on busy days, it can get up to like a 30-minute wait, but typically you're going to see it lower than that. It is a really fun attraction and one that I like to just hop on whenever I need a filler attraction. And I most often do it several times throughout my trip. It also happens to be one of my daughter's favorites and one that I like to ride with friends. So it's just a win-win all around for that one, for me in particular. But if you've got a kiddo that loves Little Mermaid, this one is one that should be on your list for sure. The next attraction that we're going to talk about on our Ultimate Guide to Dark Rides over at Magic Kingdom is It's a Small World. And now this one is a little bit of a debate, but I think it's like one of the original dark rides. And I think I just love this ride. A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't like the dolls or they don't like the song. I love this ride. It is a boat ride that takes you through all of the continents and it features the children of the world and they sing the precious song about how similar we all truly are. And I just love the message and I love this ride. Part of the reason why I love this ride so much is when we took my son on his very first trip to Disney, this was the ride that he finally reacted to. He was just under 2 years old when we took him, and he went on a ton of rides and seemed to enjoy them, but it wasn't until we got him on Small World that he finally, it clicked, and he just reacted and had the biggest smile and grin and was clapping along to the song, and we rode it several times that trip, so that's probably part of it, but I just really love this ride, and part of that is that it's one of the OG rides at Disney World, right? So it was created, brief history moment here, it was created for the 1964-1965 New York World's Fair. It was overseen by Walt Disney in support and partnership with the United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF. So the attraction was a massive hit at the World's Fair, and it did 2 seasons there, and then it went to Disneyland, where it opened in 1966 in Disneyland, and then in 1971 was recreated to become one of the opening day attractions for Walt Disney World. So I love the story behind it. They just recently added a brand new verse written by the Sherman Brothers to the end room, which I love. I don't know. There's something about this ride that I just love it. So it is an any height attraction and no major sensory concerns for kiddos other than they may get sick of the song as you ride through. But I love Small World. It is a really, really great ride for littles. Absolutely for sure. And I think it's one that you need to ride at least once in your lifetime. So maybe your next trip will be the one that you finally take a few minutes out of your day to ride it. It is in the air conditioning and inside, which is nice. So helpful there for that. Now, on to something completely different. Right around the corner from It's a Small World is our next dark ride, which is the Haunted Mansion. So from one side of the feelings to the other side. But for the Haunted Mansion, you will climb aboard your ride vehicle, aka your Doom buggy, to take a trip through an eerie haunted estate, home to many ghosts and ghouls. This attraction can be scary to kiddos. I love this attraction. Let me put that out there. And the way that I like to kind of reframe it for the littles that are maybe skeptical about riding it is we talk about it being a ghost party. So you get through the creepy part, and the only reason the first part is kinda creepy is because all of the ghosts are at the party at the end. So it's just empty. It's not creepy and scary. It's just empty because all the ghosts are at the party. So I think this is a super fun one. Sensory-wise, it is a little scary just subject matter-wise, if your kiddos are unsure about ghosts and kind of the supernatural aspect of that. It is dark, obviously, for much of the ride. Your doom buggy, your ride vehicle is completely dark the entire time, and there's very low lighting in most of the scenes, the brightest section being the very end graveyard, party scene that you get to go through at the end of the ride. But just a note for this one, if you've got kiddos that are skeptical, and we did this for our kiddos' first ride, is you can ask the cast member that is working the door at the Haunted Mansion, like, you can ask out front, but it's better to ask when you get, like, to the actual entrance after you go through the queue. You can ask them if you can skip the stretching room, because the stretching room can be a little bit more triggering for kiddos because it does go dark with the storytelling elements. There are some kind of more mature storytelling elements in there that you may or may not want to go into depending on your kiddo. So you can ask the cast member to skip the stretching room. We did that and they just walked us through there's like a back hallway that you can go out from them, like, so when you walk in, you're in, like, that parlor entrance room, and then you go into one of the stretching rooms. From that room, there's a side door that they walk you around a hallway, and then you end up in the same hallway that you would end up with, or you would end up in after you come out of the stretching room. So the only thing that you're doing is just skipping that scene, but if the cast member is able to accommodate that, if they have somebody that can walk you through that, then they would definitely be able to do that if you ask them to do that. So sensory wise, again, dark for much of the ride. And then Becca in our live chat brought up a really good point that the cemetery scene at the end, there are some figures that pop up from behind some of the tombstones in that scene. So they're rather slow in their popping motion. So that at least is good, but if you've got a kiddo that might be, spooked by that, put them on the inside or make sure they're towards the center and not leaning out the edge of the, doom buggy to try to see things and end up with a ghouly animatronic, popping up right by their face. So that's a very good point, Becca. Thank you for that. So that is the Haunted Mansion in a nutshell. Again, that's probably one of the trickiest dark rides to try to get little kids on just because of subject matter. But ultimately, it's meant to be a fun experience, and meant to be more playful than it is meant to be scary overall. So sticking with, or I guess venturing back into Fantasyland now, we're going to talk about Peter Pan's Flight as our next dark ride. In Peter Pan's Flight, you are going to fly to Neverland in your own Jolly Roger pirate ship ride vehicle. You fly over London and then you fly through several Neverland scenes from the movie. For this one, I will just note, be sure that your littles sit towards the center of the ride vehicle. It wasn't until I got my kids on this ride vehicle that I really realized how open they are just by design. So just be aware of that because they are very open on the sides. So sit them towards the middle, sandwich them between grown-ups if you can, or just keep them real close to you in the center of your ride vehicle for that. Sensory wise, it is dark. There are lights in the different scenes around and things like that, but ultimately it is a fairly dark ride. Again, dark ride, right? And this one is one to be weary of if you are someone that doesn't like heights because you are elevated off of the ground. So it's not like something like Little Mermaid or Haunted Mansion where you're on the ground level with everything. You are up and elevated and either looking down or looking straight out to the different scenes in this one. So if you or a kiddo or someone in your group is not cool with heights, just be ready for that on that one. But overall, it's an OG ride. It's a very popular ride just for the nostalgia factor, but definitely a good dark ride to do with your little kiddos. The next one on our list, now still in Fantasyland, is one of my absolute favorites. If you know me, you know this one is one of my favorites. It is The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. This one is such a cute themed attraction. I love the storytelling elements of this one, and Pooh Bear is just one of my favorite characters. But on this ride, you're going to board a honey pot and revisit all of your favorite 100 Acre Wood friends. Basically, everybody that you can remember from those books is featured in one way or another in this story. And it's basically like you are literally jumping into the pages of the storybook. So, really great theming with this one. Now, sensory wise, this does have some bumpiness, some rocking, and some bouncing, quote unquote, of the ride vehicle, but nothing is too overstimulating as far as I'm concerned with that one. It isn't any height ride. Also, Peter Pan's was too, and was Haunted Mansion. I don't know that I mentioned that with those. Apologies if I didn't, but these are all any height attractions over at Magic Kingdom. So, Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh is an any height attraction. One of the really nice things about this one is if you do end up waiting a little bit in the standby queue for this, they have a fully immersive and interactive queue area. So the first part of the queue, once you get under the like overhang, because some of the queue is a little bit outside, but once you get underneath, you are in Rabbit's Garden, and there's a ton of interactive things that you can play with. You get a little further down, and there's little bees and beehives you can play with. And then even further around the corner, you get to the honey walls where you can wave your hand in front of the wall. You don't actually have to touch it if you are worried about germs. You don't actually have to touch the screen, but you can wave your hand over the honey on the screen and watch the characters appear from underneath the honey that is running down the walls. So the cue of this is really great. The theming starts from the moment that you enter into that queue. Really, really fun, immersive attraction over at Winnie the Pooh. A few more that we've got to talk about here, rounding out our list of the ultimate guide to dark rides at Walt Disney World. The next one we're going to mention is Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Now, we did talk about this one as a thrill ride. There were more than I remembered, but this is a thrill ride, dark ride because of that big drop at the end. But really, honestly speaking, aside from the drops, this is really a dark ride, right? It's a log flume style dark ride. But so if you want more information about that one, do take a look back at the episode we did right before this, because we're not getting into thrill rides today, but that is a dark ride, thrill ride option that you have over at Magic Kingdom. Two more here on our list of dark rides. The next one we're going to talk about is just around the corner from Tiana's Bayou Adventure, and that is Pirates of the Caribbean. And I pulled the description for this one off of the Disney website because I think it's a super fun description the way that they like talk about it on the website. And they say you set sail on a swashbuckling voyage to a long forgotten time and place when pirates and privateers ruled the seas. I just thought that was such a fun description. I was like, I can't top that one. So, Pirates of the Caribbean is one of those well known, super nostalgic attractions over at Magic Kingdom. It does have a drop that is completely in the dark. So that is one reason why you need to look at this ride before you take your kiddos on it, is just for that aspect. That drop happens right after the first scene of the attraction at Magic Kingdom. So you're going to board your boat, take off. You're going to go by like an abandoned shipwreck style scene with some skeletons and other kind of creepy pirate things. You're going to see the pirate skull up in the corner, which is where your ride photo is actually taken. And then immediately after that, you go down your hill into the rest of the attraction. But that drop does happen completely in the dark. So with my kiddos, they don't love surprises like that. So as long as I warned them, they were fine, right? As long as I said, okay, here's your drop, then they knew it was coming and they knew what to be prepared for as far as that goes. This is another one similar to Frozen that we talked about earlier, where you will likely get splashed on this ride, and it could vary from a few drops to an entire side of your body getting wet. So, again, if you've got kiddos that are completely adverse to getting wet, put them towards the center of the boat the best that you can. And it It's really hit or miss. It really depends on the ride. It depends on how much water and how full the ride is for the day. It depends on what sections or the timing is of the first scene you go into. So after the drop, you go into like a fight, quote unquote, scene with cannonballs flying, quote unquote. Not really, but the simulation of that. And there are water effects with that. If you time it right, you don't get splashed from those. If you time it wrong, you get very wet from those. So, and there's no way to tell. So, keep that in mind with this one. This is another one that can be a little bit spooky or scary maybe for kids. But again, it's all about the approach. So we talked about that with Haunted Mansion. With this one, I just approach it with my kids about, we talk about pirates. We talk about specifically the pirates in this attraction, right? And how they are just really silly pirates and they're trying to cause trouble and things like that. So we kind of talk about the storyline, we talk about what's going to happen, and they're usually okay with it. It's not one of their favorite attractions, but they'll go on it for that. It isn't any height attraction, like I mentioned. All of these are, other than the thrill ride ones that we've talked about. And sensory wise, again, this one does have that drop that is completely in the dark. You will get wet. It does have some smells in this one that you can smell. And if you've got kiddos that are sensitive to fire, there is a scene where there's like buildings on fire in the background that you may just want to like prep them for, like, hey, this is not real. It's just pretend. It's just make believe, those things. And then the cannons in that first scene can be a little loud and startling because they kind of come out of nowhere. And those water effects can be a little bit of a jump scare if your kiddos are not ready for it. So, it's definitely some sensory things to take into account if you're planning to go on Pirates. But overall, it's not super scary. It's a really fun, nostalgic attraction over at Magic Kingdom. Okay, we have reached the last one in our list of dark rides for this episode, and that is the newly refurbished Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin. So we're hopping all the way over to the other side of the park now, over to Tomorrowland. And in this one, this is another one that is like a game style attraction. For this one, you're going to fire your blasters to help defeat the evil Emperor Zurg in this newly refurbed game attraction. So they just reopened this one in the spring of this year, and I think the refurb that they did on it is fantastic, especially for little kids. Super fun for adults too, because they made the game harder and they made the max out limit higher, which is super fun for anybody who was used to the old style game that was able to max out that galactic hero score on there. But the thing that I love about what they did is the new blasters are not attached. They're handheld, so you have more freedom to move around. It's easier to find your laser to show where you're aiming. And it has new ride haptics that tell you when you're hitting a target. So as you are firing and looking for the Zerg targets across the game, you will know and your kiddos will know whether or not you're hitting the target, which I think was a huge win. It was much needed for this attraction because the old version, it was hard to tell which laser pointer was yours. It was hard to tell if you were actually scoring points or hitting a target. So all of the new improvements that they made on this attraction are 10 out of 10, especially for kiddos that are going to be going on this, which is really, really, really nice. It isn't any height attraction. And as far as sensory things go with this, it is a little bit dark. It's not as dark as some of the other ones that we've talked about, but there is some elements of darkness in there. And the only other thing that I will note is you have control over the way that your car like spins side to side because it is a game attraction. You can adjust. There's a little lever that you use to spin your car from left to right to get different targets and things like that. So depending on who's in charge of that, it may or may not affect your, if you've got a motion sickness or anything like that that you're dealing with, maybe you should be the one in charge of the spinning back and forth. And I would caution you with putting a little kiddo in charge because that may give you a headache by the time you're done with the game. But overall, not a huge sensory concern on this one. It can be a little bit overstimulating just because there's a lot going on because of the game style atmosphere, but overall, it's a really, really fun family attraction, similar like I talked about to Toy Story Mania, where you can, jump on and challenge your kiddos to beat your score and have a good time all together as a family. Definitely recommend Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin for that. Or that concludes our list for the ultimate guide to dark rides at Walt Disney World. Now, if you've been with us for this series, you know that at the end of all of these episodes where we've talked about either different characters or different IP or thrill rides or now dark rides, I give you kind of my overall thoughts on itineraries. Here's the thing with dark rides and these itineraries. A lot of these parks, if you're planning to do the dark rides, especially Epcot and Magic Kingdom, you're going to need a whole day there, right? It's really not feasible to jump through all 4 parks and do all of the dark rides in one day, especially if you've got littles that are with you. So I would take this list. I would look at what IP, what characters most interests your group, and I would base my list of rides off of that. Again, if you've got kiddos that are like toddler, preschool, early elementary age, Epcot and Magic Kingdom are going to be your 2 best parks for dark rides. Now, if you've got some kiddos that want the thrill rides and some kiddos that want the dark rides, well, then you're going to have to kind of take last week's episode and this episode, listen to all the info, and kind of pick and choose what you think your group is going to want to do. So I don't really have a true suggestion because these dark rides are so dependent on your group. It depends on what their sensory needs are. It depends on what their interests are, like I said, characters and IP wise. So take all of those things into consideration. Take a look at your lists and plan accordingly from there. Now, I will go through and mention just briefly some of these rides are best suited to ride using Lightning Lane. Animal Kingdom Lightning Lane, if you are there early in the morning, you do not need to worry about that for Navi River Journey. It doesn't get a long wait time until about 2 hours park after park open. Over at Epcot, most of your dark rides, aside from Frozen and Remy, you can probably get on without a lightning lane. And with Frozen or Remy, if you're going to rope drop during early entry, you're going to have to do one or the other. You're not going to be able to get both done. So pick one of those. Frozen, I think, is more accessible to everybody. Remy is a little bit more intense with some of those jump scares and sensory elements that we talked about. But everything else on that list, you can likely get through in a morning without needing lightning lanes. Now, if you're also going to do the thrill rides at Epcot, if you're going to add in things like Test Track, if you're going to add in Mission Space, if you're going to add in Guardians of the Galaxy, you're going to want to have lightning lanes for those. But most of these dark rides you can probably get through with less than a 30-minute wait, depending on. Now, Epcot has low weights early in the morning and lower weights like later in the afternoon and evening when everybody is out wandering World Showcase and eating. So plan accordingly for that one. Hollywood Studios, you are definitely going to need lightning lanes, even if you just want to do those 2. You could probably get one of them done during rope drop or early entry, but by the time you get one of them done, it's likely that you're going to see a long wait for the other. Now, if you are just going for the 2 dark rides, I would rope drop Toy Story Mania, and then I would go immediately to Runaway Railway. Runaway Railway, you're probably still going to be looking at a 30-minute wait, even if you are there super early. Now, you may get lucky if you get through Toy Story Mania fairly quickly. You may be able to get in line for Runaway Railway like right when the park opens and not have too long of a wait for that. But chances are good if you're going to Hollywood Studios, you're also going to be doing some of the thrill rides that we talked about. So lightning lanes are definitely a must for the thrill rides at Hollywood Studios. As far as Magic Kingdom goes, maybe 2/3 of these attractions you'd be able to get on without lightning lane. You definitely are going to need a lightning lane or you're going to need to rope drop for Peter Pan. is a very, very popular ride. Buzz Lightyear is very popular right now because it's so new with the new refurb. A lot of people are going there because they haven't ridden the new version of it yet. And Winnie the Pooh can get a long line because it is directly across from Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. And if your group has to split because you have littles that won't ride Seven Dwarfs, they typically go to Pooh. So those 3 are gonna be the hardest to get on without using lightning lanes. The rest of them, you can probably get on if you're just looking to do the dark rides with, again, less than a 30-minute wait. Haunted Mansion can get longer as the day goes on, so definitely make a plan accordingly, and that one doesn't open Haunted Mansion does not open with early entry. Buzz Lightyear will open with early entry. Peter Pan, all those Fantasyland rides will open with early entry, but, Haunted Mansion, Pirates, and Tiana's Thrill Ride, Dark Ride, do not open until official park opens, so keep those things in mind. So, again, I don't have, like, a set itinerary. I gave you my best suggestions as far as Lightning Lane versus Standby goes. Now, if you are someone that heard all these rides and you're like, "Okay, I know what we wanna do, but I need help figuring out what's my plan of attack for these," send me a message. I would love to help you with that. Trip itineraries and helping to figure out lightning lane order and things like that is like my bread and butter. It's my specialty. So please reach out to me, momstreetusa@gmail.com, if you've got additional questions about that, or if you just need help with trip planning in general. I am not a travel agent, but I am happy to help with itineraries or look over a plan that you have and make suggestions if you want a second set of eyes to take a look at that before you go on your trip. So, all of that being said, hopefully this information has been helpful to you. If you have suggestions for future episodes of Mom Street USA, I would love to hear from you and hear what type of information would be helpful for you as you are planning a trip, whether it's your first trip or your 10th trip, maybe just a new perspective on a trip that you're planning for this summer or this fall or into the holiday season for this year. You can again reach me, momstreetusa@gmail.com, or at momstreetusa on several various social media platforms, including our Patreon account, where you can definitely comment and we can chit chat back and forth with the community as well about that. Thank you guys so much for being here for this episode of Mom Street USA, and I will see you on the next one.